Letter 2. To Mrs. Saville, England. Archangel, 28th of March, 17. How slowly the time passes, here, encompassed as I am by frost and snow. Yet a second step is taken towards my enterprise. I have hired a vessel, and I am occupied in collecting my sailors. Those whom I have already engaged appear to be men on whom I can depend, and are certainly possessed of dauntless courage. But I have one want which I have never yet been able to satisfy, and the absence of the object of which now I feel as a most severe evil. I have no friend, Margaret. When I am glowing with the enthusiasm of success, there will be none to participate my joy. If I am assailed by disappointment, no one will endeavour to sustain me in dejection. I shall commit my thoughts to paper, it is true, but that is a poor medium for the communication of feeling. I desire the company of a man who could sympathize with me, whose eyes would reply to me mine. You may deem me romantic, my dear sister, but I bitterly feel the want of a friend. I have no one near me, gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well as a capacious mind, whose tastes are like my own to approve or amend my plans. How would such a friend repair the faults of your poor brother? I am too ardent in execution, and too impatient of difficulties. But it is still a greater evil to me that I am self-educated. For the first 14 years of my life I ran on a common, and read nothing but our Uncle Thomas's books of voyages. At that age I became acquainted with the celebrated poets of our own country, but it was only when it had ceased to be in my power to derive the most important benefits from such a conviction that I perceived the necessity of becoming acquainted with more languages than that of my native country. Now I am 28, and in reality more literate than many schoolboys of 15. It is true that I have thought more, and that my daydreams are more extended and magnificent, but they want, as the painters call it, keeping, and I greatly need a friend who would have the sense enough not to despise me as romantic, and affection enough for me to endeavour to regulate my mind. Well, these are useless complaints. I shall certainly find no friend on the wide ocean, or even here in Archangel, among the merchants and seamen. Yet some feelings, allied to the dross of human nature, beat even in these rugged bosoms. My lieutenant, for instance, is a man of wonderful courage and enterprise, and he is madly desirous of glory, or rather, to word my phrase more characteristically, of advancement in his profession. He is an Englishman, and in the midst of national and professional prejudices, unsoftened by cultivation, retains some of the noblest endowment of humanity. I first became acquainted with him on board a whale vessel. Finding he was employed in the city, I easily engaged him to assist in my enterprise. The master is a person of excellent disposition, and is remarkable in the ship for his gentleness and mildness of discipline. This circumstance, added to his known integrity and dauntless courage, made me very desirous to engage him. A youth passed in solitude, my best years spent under your gentle and feminine fosterage, has so refined the groundwork of my character, that I cannot overcome an intense desire to use an intense distaste to the usual brutality exercised on board ship. I have never believed it to be necessary, and when I heard of a mariner equally noted for his kindliness of heart, and respect and obedience paid to him by his crew, I felt myself particularly fortunate in being able to secure his services. I heard of him first in a rather romantic manner, from a lady who owes him the happiness of her love. This, briefly, is his story. Some years ago, he loved a young Russian lady of moderate fortune, and having amassed a considerable sum in prize money, the father of the girl consented to the match. He saw his mistress once before the destined ceremony, but she was bathed in tears, and throwing herself at his feet, entreated him to spare her, confessing at the same time that she loved another, but that he was poor, and her father would never consent to that union. My generous friend reassured the supplicant, and on being informed of the name of her lover, instantly abandoned his pursuit. He had already bought a farm with his money, on which he designed to pass the remainder of his life, but he bestowed the whole on his rival, together with the remains of his prize money to purchase stock, and then himself solicited the young woman's father to consent to her marriage with her lover. But the old man decidedly refused, thinking himself bound on honour to my friend, who, when he found his father inexorable, quitted his country, nor returned when he heard that his former mistress was married according to her inclinations. What a noble fellow, you may exclaim. He is so, but he was wholly uneducated, and he is silent as a Turk, and a kind of ignorant carelessness attends him, which, while it renders his conduct the more astounding, detracts from the interest and sympathy which otherwise he would command. Yet do not suppose, because I complain a little, or because I can conceive a consolation for my toils which I may never know, that I am wavering in my resolutions. Those are as fixed as fate, and my voyage is now only delayed until the weather shall permit my embarkation. The winter has been dreadfully severe, but the spring promises well, and it is considered as a remarkable early season, so perhaps I may sail sooner than expected. I shall do nothing rashly. You know me sufficiently to confide in my prejudice and considerateness whenever the safety of others is committed to my care. I cannot describe to you my sensations on the near prospect of my undertaking. It is impossible to communicate to you a conception of the trembling sensation, half pleasurable and half fearful, to which I had been prepared to depart. But I am going to unexplored regions, to the land of mist and snow, but I shall kill no albatross. Therefore do not be alarmed for my safety, or if I should come back to you as worn and woeful as the ancient mariner. You will smile at my illusion, but I will disclose a secret. I have often attributed my attachment to, my passionate enthusiasm for, the dangerous mysteries of the ocean, to that production of the most imaginative of modern poets. There is something at work in my soul which I do not understand. I am practically industrious, painstaking, a workman to execute with perseverance and labour. But besides that, there is a love for the marvellous, a belief in the marvellous, intertwined in all my projects, which hurries me out of the common pathways of men, even to the wild sea and unvisited regions which I am about to explore. But to return to dearer consideration, shall I meet you again, after having traversed immense seas, and returned by the most southern cape of Africa or America? I dare not expect such success, but I cannot bear to look on the reverse of the picture. Continue for the present to write to me by every opportunity. I may receive your letters on some occasions when I need them most to support my spirits. I love you very tenderly. Remember me with affection, should you never hear from me again. Your affectionate brother, Robert Walton. Letter 3. To Miss Saville, England, July 7th, 17. My dear sister, I write a few lines in haste to say that I am safe and well advanced on my voyage. This letter will reach England by a merchantman now on his homeward voyage from Archangel, more fortunate than I, who may not see my native land, or perhaps for many years. I am, however, in good spirits. My men are bold, and apparently firm of purpose, nor do the floating sheets of ice that continually pass us, indicating the dangers of the region towards which we are advancing, appear to dismay them. We have already reached a very high latitude, but it is in the height of summer, and although not so warm in England, the southern gales which already blow us speedily towards those shores, which I am so ardently desire to attain, breathe a degree of renewing warmth which I had not expected. No incidents have hitherto befallen us that would make a figure in the letter. One or two stiff gales, the springing of a leak, are accidents which experienced navigators scarcely remember to record. I shall be well content if nothing worse happens to us during our voyage. Adieu, my dear Margaret. Be assured that for my own sake as well as yours, I will not rashly encounter danger. I will be cool, persevering, and prudent. But success shall crown my endeavours. What for not? Thus far I have gone, tracing a secure way over the pathless seas, the very stars themselves being witnesses and testimonies of my triumph. Why not still proceed over the untamed yet obedient element? What can stop the determined heart and resolved will of man? My heart swells involuntarily, pours itself out thus. But I must finish. Heaven bless my beloved sister. R.W. Letter 4. To Mrs. Saville, England, August 5th, 17. So strange an accident has happened to us that I cannot forbear recording it, although it is very possible that you will see me before these papers come into your possession. Last Monday, July 31st, we were nearly surrounded by ice, which closed in on the ship along all sides, scarcely leaving her sea-room in which she floated. Our situation was somewhat dangerous, especially since we were compassed round by very thick fog. We accordingly lay to, hoping that some change would take place in the atmosphere and weather. About 2 o'clock, the mist cleared away, and we were beheld, stretching out in every direction, vast and irregular plains of ice, which seems to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, and when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention, and divided our solstice from our own situation. We perceived a low carriage, fixed on a sledge and drawn by dogs, passed on towards north, at a distance of half a mile. A being which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, sat in the sledge and guided the dogs. We watched the rapid progress of the traveller with our telescopes, until he was lost among the distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder. We were, as believed, many hundred miles from any land, and by this apparition seemed to denote that it was not, in reality, so distant that we had supposed. Shut in, however, by ice, it was impossible to follow his track, which we had observed with the greatest attention. About 2 hours after this occurrence, we heard the ground sea, and before night the ice broke and freed our ship. We, however, lay to until morning, fearing our encounter in the dark, those large loose masses which float about after the breaking up of the ice. I profit of this time to rest for a few hours. In the morning, however, as soon as it was light, I went upon deck and found all the sailors busy on one side of the vessel, apparently talking to someone in the sea. It was, in fact, a sledge, like the one we had seen before, which had drifted toward us in the night on a large fragment of ice. Only one dog remained alive, but there was a human being within it, whom the sailors were persuading to enter the vessel. He was not, as some travellers seem to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island, but a European. When I appeared on deck, the master said, "Here is our captain, and he will not allow you to perish on the open sea." On perceiving me, the stranger addressed me in English, although with a foreign accent. "Before I come on board your vessel," he said, "will you have the kindness to inform me on where you are bound?" You may convince my astonishment on hearing such a question, addressed to me from a man on the brink of destruction, and whom I should have supposed that my vessel would have been a resource which he could not have exchanged for the most precious wealth the earth could afford. I replied, however, that we were on a voyage of discovery towards the northern pole. Upon hearing that, he appeared satisfied, and consented to come up on board. Good God! Margaret, if you had seen a man who was thus capitulated for his safety, your surprise would have been boundless. His limbs were nearly frozen, and his body was dreadfully emaciated by fatigue and suffering. I had never saw a man so in a wretched condition. We attempted to carry him into the cabin, but as soon as he was quitted the fresh air, he fainted. We accordingly brought him back to the deck, and restored him to animation by rubbing him with brandy, and forcing him to swallow a small quantity. As soon as he showed signs of life, we wrapped him up in blankets, and placed him near the chimney of the kitchen stove. By slow degrees he recovered, and ate a little soup, which restored him wonderfully. 2 days passed in this manner before he was able to speak, and I often feared that his suffering had deprived him of understanding. When he had in some measure recovered, I removed him to my own cabin, and attended to him as much as my duty would permit. I never saw a more interesting creature. His eyes have generally an expression of wildness, and even madness, but there were moments when, if any one performs an act of kindness towards him, or does him any most trifling service, his whole countenance is lightened up, as it were, with a beam of benevolence and sweetness which I have never saw equalled. But he was generally melancholy and despairing, and sometimes he gnashes his teeth, as if impatient of the weight of the woes that oppress him. When my guest was a little recovered, I had great trouble to keep off the men, who wished to ask him 1,000 questions, but I would not allow him to be tormented by their idle curiosity, in a state of body and mind whose restoration evidently depended upon entire repose. Once, however, the lieutenant asked why he had come so far from the ice on so strange a vehicle. His countenance instantly assumed an aspect of deepest gloom, and he replied, "To seek the one who fled from me." "And did the man you pursued travel in the same fashion?" "Yes." "Then I fancied we have seen him. For the day before we picked you up, we saw some dogs drawing a sledge with a man on it, and across the ice." This aroused the stranger's attention, who asked a multitude of questions concerning the route which the demon, as he called him, had pursued. Soon after, when he was alone with me, he said, "I have doubtless excited your curiosity, and as well as that of these good people. Yet you are too considerate to make inquiries." "Certainly it would be indeed very impertinent and inhumane in me to trouble you with such inquisitiveness of mine." "And yet you rescued me from the strange and perilous situation. You have benevolently restored me to life." Soon after this, he inquired if I thought the breaking up of the ice had destroyed the other sledge. I replied that I could not answer with any degree of certainty, for the ice had not broken until nearly midnight, and the traveller had arrived at the place of safety before that time. But of this I could not judge. From this a new spirit of life animated the decaying flame of the stranger. He manifested the greatest eagerness to be on deck, to watch for the sledge which had before appeared, but I had persuaded him to remain in the cabin, for he was far too weak to sustain the rawness of the atmosphere. I have promised him that someone will watch for him, and give him instant notice if any new object should appear in the night. Such is my journal of what relates to the strange occurrence up to this present day. The stranger has gradually improved in health, yet he is very silent, and appears uneasy when anyone enters his cabin. Yet his manners are conciliating and gentle, and that the sailors are all interested in him, although they have very little in communication with him. For my own part, I begin to love him as a brother, and his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. He must have been a noble creature in his better days, being even now so attractive and admirable. I said in one of my letters, dear Margaret, that I should find no friend on this wide ocean, yet I have found a man who, before his spirit has been broken by misery, I should been happy to have possessed as a brother of my heart. I shall continue my journey concerning the stranger in intervals, should I have any fresh incidents to record. August 13, 17. My affection for my guests increases every day. He excites at once my admiration, my pity to an astonishing degree. How can I see such a noble creature destroyed by misery without feeling the most poignant grief? He is so gentle, yet so wise. His mind is so cultivated, and when he speaks, although his words are cold of the choicest arts, yet they flow with rapidity and unparalleled eloquence. Now he is much recovered from his illness, and is continually on the deck, apparently watching for the sledge that preceded his own. Yet, although unhappy, he is not so utterly occupied by his own misery, but that he interests himself deeply in the projects of others. He has frequently conversed with me on mine, which I have communicated to him without disguise. He entered attentively into all my arguments in favor of my eventual success, and in every minute detail of the measures I had taken to secure it. I was easily led by sympathy, which he envied, to use the language of my heart, to give utterance to the burning ardor of my soul, and to say, with all the fervor that warmed me, how gladly I would sacrifice my fortune, my existence, my every hope to the furtherance of our enterprise. One man's life or death were but a small price to pay for the acquirement of knowledge which I had sought, for the dominion I should acquire and transmit over the elemental force foes of our race. As I spoke, a dark gloom spread over my listener's countenance. At first I perceived that he had tried to suppress his emotion. He had placed his hands before his eyes, and my voice quivered and failed me, as I beheld tears trickle fast beneath his fingers. A groan burst from his heaving breast. I paused. At length he spoke in broken accents. "Unhappy man, do you share my madness? Have you drank also of the intoxicating draught? Help me. Let me reveal my tale, and you will dash the cups from your lips." Such words, you may imagine, strongly excited my curiosity, but the paroxysm of grief that had seized the stranger overcame his weakened powers, and many hours of repose and tranquil conversation were necessary to restore his composure. Having conquered the violence of his feelings, he appeared to despise himself for being the slave of passion, quelling the dark tyranny of despair. He led me again to converse concerning me personally. He asked me of the history of my earlier years. The tale was quickly told, but awakened various trains of reflection. I spoke of my desire of finding a friend, of my thirst for a more intimate sympathy with a fellow mind that then had ever fallen to my lot, and expressed my conviction that a man could boast of little happiness who did not enjoy this blessing. "I agree with you," replied the stranger. "We are unfashioned creatures, but half made up of one wiser, better, dearer than ourselves. Such a friend ought to be. Do not lend his aid to perfectionate our weak and faulty natures. I once had a friend, the most noble of human creatures, and am entitled, therefore, to judge respecting friendship. You have hope and the world before you, and have no cause for despair. But I have lost everything, and cannot begin life anew." As he said this, his countenance became expressive of calm, settled grief that touched me to the heart. But he was silent, and presently retired to his cabin. Even in broken spirits as he is, no one can feel more deeply than does the beauties of nature. The starry sky, the sea, and every sight afforded by those wonderful regions seemed still to have the power of elevating his soul from earth. Such a man has a double existence. He may suffer misery, but be overwhelmed by disappointments. Yet, when he is retired into himself, he will be like a celestial spirit that has a halo around him, within whose circle no grief or folly ventures. Will you smile at the enthusiasm I express concerning this divine wanderer? Will you not, if you saw him? You have been tutored and refined by books and retirement from this world, and you are, therefore, somewhat fastidious. But this only renders you more fit to appreciate the extraordinary merits of this wonderful man. Sometimes I have endeavored to discover what quality it is he possesses that elevates him so immeasurably above any person I have ever known. I believe it to be intuitive discernment, a quick but never-failing power of judgment, a penetration into the causes of things, unequaled for the clearness and precision, add to this fallacy of expression, and a voice whose varied intonations are soul-subduing music. August 19th, 17. Yesterday the stranger said to me, "You may easily perceive, Captain Walton, that I have suffered great and unparalleled misfortunes. I have determined at one time that the memory of these evils should die with me, but you have won me to alter my determination. You seek for knowledge and wisdom, as I once did, and I ardently hope that the gratification of your wish may not be a serpent to sting you, as mine has been. I do not know what the relation of my disasters will be useful to you, yet, when I reflect that you are pursuing the same course, exposing yourself to the same dangers which had rendered me what I am, I imagine that you may deduce an apt moral from my tale, one that may direct you if you succeed in your undertaking, and console you in your case of failure. Perhaps to hear of occurrences which are usually deemed marvelous, we are amongst the tamer senses of nature. I might fear to encounter your unbelief, perhaps your ridicule, but many things will appear possible in those wild and mysterious regions which have provoked the laughter of those unacquainted with those ever-varied powers of nature. Nor can I doubt that my tale conveys in its series internal evidence of the truth of the events which it has composed. You can easily imagine that I was much gratified by the offered communication, yet I could not endure that she should renew his grief by the recital of his misfortunes. I felt the greatest eagerness to hear this promised narrative, partly from curiosity, partly from a strong desire to ameliorate his fate, if only it were in my power. I expressed these feelings in my answer. "I thank you," he answered, "for your sympathy, but it is useless. My fate is nearly fulfilled. I wait but for one event, and then I shall repose in peace. And I understand your feeling," continued he, perceiving that I wished to interrupt him. "But you are mistaken, my friend. If thus you allow me to name you, nothing can alter my destiny. Listen to my history, and you'll perceive how irrevocably it is determined." He then told me that he would commence his narrative the next day, when I should be at leisure. The promise drew from me the warmest thank. I have resolved every night, when I am not imperatively occupied by my duties, to record, as nearly as possible in his own words, what he related during the day. If I should be engaged, I will at least make notes. This manuscript will doubtless afford you the greatest pleasure, but to me, who knew him, who hear it from his own lips, with the interest and sympathy I shall read it in some future day. Even now, as I commence my task, his full-toned voice swells in my ears. His lustrous eyes dwell on me with all their melancholy sweetness. I see his thin hand raised in animation, while the lineaments of his face are irradiated by the soul within. Strange and harrowing must be his story. Frightful the storm which embraced the gallant vessel on its course, and wrecked it thus.